This week I'm going to show you how to make house music in the style of PRYDZ. This is following on in my insanely popular In the Style of videos, which you can check out there or there. And I've got to say, I'm doing this all in Ableton Live, only using the stock plugins, but you can follow along in any DAW. This is basically a remake of PRYDZ's awesome tune Opus, and I absolutely love PRYDZ and Pryda, so this was an absolute joy for me. Now, apologies for missing last week's video. I've just been moving house. As you can see, I haven't even got my new studio set up straight, but it doesn't matter because it just goes to show you don't need a fancy studio to make cool music. As usual, you can download all the project files and samples below this video completely free if you dig it. Big fat thumbs up, guys. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and without further ado, let's hop into the DAW in my new studio and get it done. Okay, so let's do it. House music in the style of PRYDZ. Today I'm going to be remaking his track Opus. So what should we call it? Opus. Let's call it Opus 3 because it's a fine day, why not, hey? Okay, first thing to do is the chords. Now I'm actually just going to bring in the chords that I've already recorded, but I'm just going to play the general chords that Opus uses. So PRYDZ always uses really epic chord progressions, and this one is reminiscent of something like Moonlight Sonata or Moonlight Sonata. It's in F minor. You can look up the chords on Chord Theory, Hook Theory, sorry. But this is pretty much them, except played as an arpeggio. And then it goes round again. So I'm just going to drag in those plucks that I recorded as an arpeggio, just for the sake of speed. And now let's create the pluck sound that's going to go with that, because that is what we're going to do from scratch. So let's call it pluck. Color it pluck colored. Plucks are always colored cyan, definitely. That's just nature. Now I'm going to use the analog, and let's listen to the sound that it starts out with. So you'll probably start recognizing that riff now. So the tune is actually 126 BPM, classic for PRYDZ. But that's at full speed. So the brilliant thing about this tune is that it starts out by a quarter tempo, basically. So if you divide 126 by 4 by doing, you know, maths, then you get 31.5. So the tune actually starts like this and builds up in speed, and you'll recognize that from the tune. So I've got my magic list. Those are the chords. Let's start creating that pluck sound and get it sounding a bit more like PRYDZ. So we're going to use a few oscillators in our synth to give it a bit more of a warm sound. He'd probably use something like one of the Arturia soft synths, but we're just going to use the stock plugins from Ableton. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that there's a filter envelope and adjust the amp to make sure that the amp's nice and plucky. That's a nice start. We are going to use a sine wave as well, just to fatten it up a bit. That will do for now. I'm going to group that. I'll open this and I'm going to duplicate it in a chain, and I'm going to call this saw, and I'm going to call this second one square. And this is where we're going to just make that slightly richer sound. So let's choose square waves for this one. And just detune them slightly. And then mix in the original saw wave we just made. Cool, sounding pretty cool. Next thing we are going to do is EQ out some of those low end frequencies. And we're going to add some saturation to give it a bit of bite. Then we are going to get onto the more epic stuff. Cool. Okay, on to the next thing. That would be the delay. So if we create an auxiliary channel for this, we call it pluck delay, pluck baby pluck. Pluck you silly. Okay. let's get a delay on there, and we are going to use the standard delay. And that's because when we change the tempo, which we're going to automate very soon, if we use the echo plugin, it kind of makes the pitch go weird as it changes tempo, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to turn the feedback right down and just get the timing sounding about right. It's kind of like almost triplets. I'm going to take out the low end of the delay. Cool, that will do for now. Maybe a touch less of the delay. Okay, next is the bass, because in fact, no, let's do the automation first. So you'll recognize the tune if I do this. Don't know how many times it repeats because I don't have the original tune with me, but let's say it's like a lot. Okay, and now if we open up master here and then right click at show automation, and now we can choose the minimum tempo we want, which is 31.5, and the maximum is 126, and that just makes it easy. Then we can go click there, and then we can just automate it up to 126 after it's repeated, say, I don't know, 6 times. So you can hear that's the full speed. Now, what we're going to do is open up the filter on this as well. So if we open this button here, we can control a macro, and we're going to assign a macro controls several parameters at once. So we're going to choose the saw one we did. Just to make it easier, I'll rename the actual synth itself as well, so you can see that there are 2 synths in this group. Square. Or Squire, almost. Days of old Squire. Sorry, as I said, I've just moved house and I'm tired. I'm going to say things like that. Deal with it. Right, okay, so we press map, frequency, map it. We are also going to map the amp sustain to this to make it kind of open up and sound bigger. And then we are going to do the exact same thing with the Squire synth. So click map, frequency, map to that knob, and similarly amp, then map, sustain, map, boom. So it opens up to that ultimately. We can start it off like this. And you'll see, in fact, let's tweak the EQ on this as well a bit. And I'm going to add a bit of a compressor just to make it a bit more plucky. Plucky little soul. To give it a bit more impact, a bite there. Cool, and let's add a little bit of room reverb, which you can see I've got on an auxiliary channel. It's just a short reverb, short decay time. Okay, now let's add the bass, because when the bass comes in, it's like, yes, well done, PRYDZ. I accept that bass into my heart. So let's just create, and you'll notice it's not 4 bars long, it's like 6 bars long in each repetition of this riff, which again gives it a bit more of an interesting classical music vibe than a usual house track. But usually Eric PRYDZ would work in, 4 bars, 8 bars, same as standard. Okay, let's just color that. Now I'm going to make the bass sound from scratch as well. And what I'm going to do is just get another analog. So let's whack that on there. And first we are going to get the notes in, and then we'll tweak the sound. You'll notice the tune itself actually starts halfway through. It starts halfway through the first measure, which is a bit weird. So actually the tune starts like this. But when the beats come in, they come in on this bit. So anyway, I'll write the bass from here because I know which bass notes it is in my head. But again, look up the notes on hook theory. It's in the scale of F sharp minor, probably. Yeah. So, and that's why it's easy, because it starts, the bass starts on an F, like this. Just repeating the same amount of notes as the pluck itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let's tweak that sound slightly. Just going to loop this and make it a bass sound. So again, I'm going to take the filter frequency down, take the release down and the sustain to make it plucky. Second oscillator will be a sine wave. Something like that. In fact, we could make it a bit richer by adding some unison, but then you want to make sure that you don't have like lots of phasing in the bass, because that can sound bad and you can run into phase cancellation issues. So let's write these bass notes in. You'll probably recognize this now. So all of these are just within the scale of F minor, F sharp minor. So it's very simple, down and then up. So we'll just repeat that. And now we've got the strings that come in, but actually, no, I will do the strings. So again, it's just going to be using the same chords. So let's do this in analog too. And so I'll show you how to make a synth string sound from scratch as well. Let's put the bass up there. I like the bass up there. So strings, again, I'm going to do it the same length. Strings, analog. So obviously we want a long attack like and a long release to give it a string sound. So start with the amp envelope, sustain full, release. Voila, there's a string. Definitely sounds like a real string instrument, probably. And now we're going to add a bit of richness to it with some unison voices. Probably 2's enough, otherwise it's going to make the chords hard. Nice. Okay, so let's just turn the volume down a bit. And go up an octave. And let's play along. And I will record this as well. I don't know if these are the exact notes from the original track, but it doesn't matter, we're going for the Eric Prydz vibe more than anything else. So slow. I'll start from this note though, because as I said, I find it easier. Because it starts on F sharp. Okay, so something like that. Not perfect, but it's going to do for our purposes. So let's just get that consolidated. Whoops, press copy by mistake. And we can tweak them. First, I'm going to quantize them, make sure that they're all at the same velocity so the volume stays the same throughout. And you can add some more notes as well in the same key. And Eric Prydz loves using 7th chords, and that's basically where you have the initial chord and then you add the extra 7th note on top of that. And I'm making sure that there's 4 notes in each chord so they all have the same amount of energy. Just having a little tweak. Okay, on to the next thing, the drums, the all important Eric Prydz drums. And we're gonna add an extra bass note, bass sound as well on the drop. So it's even bigger. So let's see, if we make it drop after, say, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. After 8. So 8 run-throughs of the chord progression, then we're going to drop. And Eric Prydz uses really long arrangements just to bring the very few simple elements in, but nice and kind of subtly. Okay, I think I've actually put in too many bass notes, so I'm going to halve the bass notes, like so. And I'll add a bit of release on them, so they're not so start and stop. So it goes amp, a bit softer like that. And now I'm just going to copy them. That sounds better. So I'm just going to copy that bass to all of the other bass clips. I want this pluck sound. I'm going to open it up by automating this macro. So we'll start there, and then by the time it drops, and it's going to drop here, it's going to be full power, baby. So it gets more and more epic. Right, on to the next thing. As I said, the beat. So this is where it's going to drop. First thing to do then is get a nice big kick, and I've got my sidechain trigger track here. So I'll just copy that over, and all this is a rim shot sample, very short, and that's so I can control the length of the ducking effect using just the compressor. So let's put the compressor here, and we'll time it with the... So if we open this up, I'll call it sidechain pump. Choose audio input from that sidechain channel. So that's the kind of pump that's going to happen when the drop happens. Speaking of which, let's get that kick in there. So Eric Prydz always uses lovely meaty kicks, and it's really important to spend the time selecting the right sounds first. So let's go and get a kick. That sounds pretty meaty. PRYDZ. Let's just bang that in. Bosh. Whoops. Just copy and paste it on every beat. I'm going to turn everything down as well, so we've got plenty of room on the sidechain channel. Sorry, on the master channel. And now let's copy that sidechain pump onto the bass. So you can hear it allows the kick to kind of cut through. Same on the pluck. And we're going to dial in less on the pluck, so we're just going to use this dry wet control. Now let's get that secondary bass in. That's only going to happen on the drop. I'm going to use a sample for this. I'm going to call it bass. I'm going to call it drop bass, baby. Okay. There we go. And let's get a sampler or simpler. And let's go to samples, bass. I'm going to use my trusty Vengeance bass here. Bass. Something like that sounds about right. Bit of a Juno bass sound. And I'm just going to use the same bass notes, but it's going to play a different rhythm. So it's going to be every... And we need to tweak the ADSR controls. Like so. Let's just copy that rhythm. Let's just do this quickly. Can even put a sidechain pump on there. Just to catch any loose tails. I'm not sure about those string notes. I'm going to have them follow the bass notes. That sounds better. I'll start these notes from scratch. Right, so let's show you how to build them. We'll start following the bass, like so. And we're just gonna build up thirds like this. Just simple triads. But let's try and sustain some of them to make it sound epic. And we can even do some inversions, so hold shift and go up an octave. And then all the notes are closer together on the keyboard, which just makes them sound gelled a bit better. Okay. Okay. Now let's get the rest of the beats in there. So we need a big fat Eric PRYDZ clap snare. So let's just call this drums. And then I'm just gonna search through some samples and audition them as I play to get something that sounds really good. In fact, the first thing I'm gonna do is find a snare for the build up, because that's just one layer, and then I can find another clap to go on top of that snare. And it would be easier to kind of reference. But as long as it's a nice kind of snare with a bit of low end. Probably this one. Nice and simple. Let's turn it down, like a cartoon punch in the face, that. Yep, that'll do. So we're going to use this in the main drop. But now we need the clap to go over the top of that. So let's find a clap. And the way you can do this is program them in. Well, we'll just get any old sample and then program it in. I'm just going to duplicate that. And then I'm going to scroll through some as it's playing. Perfect. Nice. So Eric, takes real care and attention over the sound selection and the synth design, and it makes mixing so much easier. Right, let's get some open hats in there, because you got to have some open hats. because this is house music. So, and again, you can just kind of program one in and then audition it as you go. Every other beat. Like so. That's not a million miles away already. So let's just kind of preview them as we go. That's good. So it's all about getting those frequencies working together. Next is I'm going to use a closed hat. Now, I don't actually know if these Vengeance sample packs are still available, but I love them. You know, they're years old, but they've just got such a nice selection of sounds. So I'm going to just tweak the velocity on these closed hats, just to give it a bit of volume variation. Nice. Now we need a bit of a... Hey, why have I got two plucks? That was a mistake. Whoops. Anyway, we kind of need this second one because now we're going to do a string pluck just to give it some extra epicness. So we can... In fact, let's just delete that and start another one. We're going to call it string pluck, and we're going to use the same notes, except let's call it string pluck. But we are going to find a different sound. We're going to use one of the strings from one of these Ableton libraries. So let's have a listen. Let's put it up an octave. So it's kind of like a violin. Nice, nice. Okay, let's just fade it up. We're getting there now. We'll have to do a bit of work on the mixing and stuff. Let's get a little sidechain pump on the go there as well. Cool, okay, we're getting there now, guys. Next thing, I'm gonna add a kind of drum beat intro. First, let's get the bass and the strings kind of faded in, because that's how it happens in the actual track. So all we're gonna do, nice and simple, is get a utility plugin, and then just gonna fade it in over one full cycle of the riff. And same with the strings. And Eric PRYDZ is a master of slowly introducing things using volume automation, using reverb automation, using filter automation. Like so. The string plucks as well, we're going to bring them in near the end of the build. Yes. Maybe these need reverb. Yes. Sounding more epic. Right, let's get this intro in. So we're just going to use the kick and the intro snare, which is this one. But we're going to filter it because you got. We can do a mix like at the end, but we're just getting the levels sounding good in our ears whilst we go. So the way I'm going to do this, first I'll have to increase the volume of this flat. And this is how we're going to give it that cool Eric Prydz feel. We're going to group the kick and the drums together. Just going to call this drum. And color it dark green, and then we're going to add a filter over this. So it's going to take out the low end and the upper end as well, like that. And we are going to automate that upper frequency, like so. And I'm going to take out the upper frequency of the kick as well. Okay, we are almost there. Now we are going to double up the business. Oh no, this is, yeah, okay, we need this intro to be longer. So let's try it here, like this. Start there. And you'll see why, because we want this snare to be doubling up. And it's doubling. Now we're cooking, baby. Oh yeah. Not yet. I'd actually probably make this longer still, the build. But you can reference the track, but there's no point just copying someone else's track. I'm doing it to show you the techniques that Eric uses in his music, so you can use some of these techniques in your own music. So we're going to keep the kick in to give it a bit more low end. And this kick, we are going to take out for the end bit, take out some of the low end. And then we'll do the drum intro there, which I'm sure you know. Of course, when the drop comes, you've got to make sure that you turn this filter off. So we're going to do that. Okay, so let's do that big fat drum intro, and what we're going to do is just 2 big Eric Prydz snares. I'll just use the ones I've already got loaded in though, because life's too short and time's kind of short. You could choose a different sound. Make them nice and loud. Okay, yes, now we are going to do the big Eric Prydz risers. And I love his music, man. I mean, he kind of makes you think that it's at the crescendo, and then you're like, oh, hello, what's this? Can I actually go any higher? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to, again, build this riser from scratch. I'm going to get an analog, and we're going to switch the pitch bend range up to maximum so we can do a nice long riser. Let's do it. Let's make it. Let's just choose the root note of the track, which is F sharp. Do a nice long F sharp. And then go to pitch bend, and then pitch bend it from as far down as it can to as high up as it can. Whoops, let's make it, consolidate that. So we go for that kind of riser effect. But we are going to start it off lower down, and whoops. And then we'll do another one, and then one more. And then we are going to go into each one of them and put it up 2 octaves. And that's so it starts from the place that we've pitch bended it to. So then it'll go straight into the next one. Whoops, I'm going to do full sustain so it doesn't sound weird. And then the last one. That might be too high, so I'm going to notch them all down 1 octave. And for this first one, I'm going to go and adjust the volume by going to the analog. Where would it be? Amp 1 level, I guess. Is there not a global volume? Must be. Yeah, there we go. And let's just automate that from 0 to 100%, just so it fades in, basically, like so. And then for the last one, we can have it actually fade out. And then we can use the shepherd tone technique, if you recall, from I think the last video I did. Yeah, the Mark Knight one. Then you can have it, another one come in underneath it. And it sounds like it's forever rising. Like so. Maybe if I offset them slightly. No, that sounds too much like a computer game motorbikes. And then for the last one, we are going to create one that's a much faster kind of sweep, just to really say, okay, this is what's happening. So let's pull that one over. And then this last one, we are going to make it 3 long. Come on, get out of the way. Me old mucker. I'll make it 4 long. And this last one, we are going to make it kind of sweep up much faster. And the way we are going to do that is firstly get rid of this dodgy volume automation. We don't need that. In fact, I'll just delete that. It's going to be easier. Start with a whole fresh clip. Okay, let's put the note in. In fact, we'll do a double rise so it's even faster. Analog, no, MIDI control, pitch bend. So we are going to do this. We're going to pitch bend it right up, and then on the higher note, we're going to pitch bend it up again. So it's going to sound like this. So it's a much faster rise than these ones. But we're going to start it lower down. So I'm going to grab both of these notes, hold Shift, press down. So it's really like. You get the idea. That's pretty much it, guys. So obviously I do a lot of work on this in terms of mix. I think the last thing I'm going to add is to make the impact bigger. Let's put a crash. So I will go to my samples, my drum hits, and just go for a crash, splash sound. Something that's filling up those high frequencies. So it's an epic. Yeah, something like that. So this is what we've got. And I'll do a bit more work on this before I give it to you to download, but don't forget to download it. So let's just have a listen through, see where we are at the moment. Whoops. I'll start it from here, and I'll do a bit of mixing as I go. Yeah. Now we got the rises. Now there are other elements later on, like but it's, you know, this is the meat of the track, big time. What a tune. Oh, that gets the heart pumping. Hope you enjoyed it, guys and gals. Don't forget, download this project completely free with all the samples and the synth programming that I've done and all of that good stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, cheers and happy producing.